Hey, thanks for joining us on the Eat Crunchy podcast. We are three sisters on a journey towards healthy lives using Weight Watchers to get there. We'd love to hear about your journey as well on our Facebook page or at eatcrunchy.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to our weekly podcast. This is Lisa and Heidi of Eat Crunchy. Rebecca is busy and couldn't join us, but she'll join us next time. So we wanted to talk about what I think is a serious topic. I mean, it's a serious topic, but it's an important topic that maybe isn't very well understood. We want to talk about addictions, food addictions, and dealing with that while you're trying to lose weight. So, we've talked about this before. We're pretty honest about the fact that we all have sort of a lot of weight to lose in this journey, and we're really working on it. Trying to work on it. It's a long journey though. It doesn't happen, right away. And there's a lot of obstacles that make it difficult and especially, slow it down. It's not as easy as just like, eat less and exercise like everybody says, because I'm pretty sure that I've got a food addiction. And Heidi, you've talked about, you feel like you do too.
Yeah, I totally think I have a true sugar addiction. And when I say true sugar addiction, I mean like I crave it. I think about it all the time. I think about the next time I'm going to get sugar. When I stop having sugar, I go through withdrawal. Like I have headaches. I'm really crabby. I think it's a true addiction to sugar.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that too. Like what behaviors, you kind of answered the question ahead of time, but like, how do you know you've got an addiction? Yeah. Some of those things for me, is like when I'm full and I'm still eating. That's one. We looked up some stuff online to try to talk about, some of the different things that hopefully semi-reputable websites say about it, but like WebMD had a list of stuff, and one of the things they talked about, or a few of the things they talked about besides just like eating when you're already full, is like finding secret ways to get it, not not telling people when you've had it, and I was like, oh my gosh, all this stuff applies to me.
That resonates with me.
Is it just sugar, or do you feel like you have any other?
For me, it's just sugar. So I, even before I joined Weight Watchers, I had written down all the things that I was eating, and I realized that half my calories came from chocolate. That's my sugar of choice. But everything else, sometimes I overeat, sometimes I'm an emotional eater, but overall, I do okay. It's really sugar. Like if I could cut out the sugar, I would be my ideal weight in no time. I'm certain. Yeah. Like I have a true problem with sugar.
I think for me it's carbs in general. I don't usually overeat on like chicken. And even just straight sugar like you're talking about, I've definitely gone overboard with that, but if I'm overeating, it's because it's like I'm having fried rice or, something that's got a heavy carb component, the bad kind of carbs. So yeah, I think it's a thing. And one of the things that I was reading was that it's sort of only recently accepted that it's like a real disorder. Yeah. Because people are like, oh, that, food, just come on, and I think actually, I think we would say it's definitely real.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, I've never been addicted to drugs, but I think that it's harder to kick than drugs or alcohol because you can't just stop eating. Right. Certainly those are hard addictions to
not to minimize.
Yeah, not to minimize that, but I can't just change my lifestyle and suddenly sugar just doesn't exist anymore. It's everywhere, and I have to eat to survive. Right. I don't have to eat sugar, but it takes a lot to avoid it. Yeah. It feels so much more difficult. But I've never been in the other scenario, so it just feels really difficult.
Right.
It's funny, so when you were talking about hiding it from people, I hadn't thought about that as like a symptom of maybe having an addiction. I remember one time I bought a box of Little Debbie's, and then we had like, my husband and I had one or whatever. Yeah. And the next day I had eaten the rest of them, that I had to go out and buy another little box of Debbie's, box of Little Debbie's, and eat just the same amount that we had eaten before. Where you were, right? And replace them as if I hadn't eaten any that day.
And there's a shame that comes with that. So one of the things that article talked about was there's, when you're addicted, then, there's a lot of things that happen afterwards. Like you get depressed and you feel shamed about the behavior that you just exhibited, like sitting in your car and eating extra food, not because that it's socially unacceptable to eat that much food in front of other people. And so you try to hide it. and you know, you sneak away, or you notice what I think one thing for me is, I know this is so embarrassing. We're so honest here. I know where all of the little candy bowls are at work. Like, I know exactly where they are. I know who keeps candy on their desk and who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just natural. And I've had to tell myself, like, you don't need to like walk across the floor and go accidentally visit somebody. Just, you can have their little.
And when I worked in an office, I knew where all the candies were, but you knew that you can't go to the same one every time, so you have to like rotate the people. That's yeah.
But I think that's evidence of that it's an addiction. So I guess, I mean, we're obviously going to try to talk about like, how do we deal with it? I think the first thing that just came to mind when we decided to talk about this, because it is sort of like a raw, difficult thing to talk about. I mean, is recognizing that it's a thing, like in your life, you know, like people that are alcoholics, they say, I'm an alcoholic, so I can't have alcohol, or they're, you know, whatever plan they're working, they acknowledge it almost as a disease. I mean, I don't know do we call it that? I don't know, but recognizing that it's a thing, it's a problem, and that you're trying to like live with and manage.
I'm thinking about like the implications of being like I'm addicted to sugar, I can't have that cake, or
right. But then, you know, that's not as normal to say, but
no, but like, how public do you be with that?
Yeah,
you know, like, not all alcoholics are either, but
sure.
I don't know. That's something to ponder. I might have to think that through a little bit. Like, how public do I?
Who do you tell?
Who do I tell that I'm not going to eat that because? And do you go totally cold turkey? I think we're going to talk about this a little later. Like, do you say I'm not going to have any sugar? Whatever it is that you're addicted to, do you not have any of it, or do you say I can just limit it?
Yeah, so that was one idea, was I thought it'd be interesting to talk about the pros and cons. There was this article about like just saying, look, I mean, you have to decide what is this addiction costing you, and is it something that you really feel that you can, you know, that you can overcome maybe by cutting it out, and is it worth that? And I appreciated that the article took the time to list the pros and cons of both.
Right.
It was like, the pro is you might actually kick the addiction if you can. So if it's sugar, stop eating sugar. But they were honest about like, but the con is, how do you go to birthday parties and how do you like exist in this world, you know, when there's sugar around? And it sort of goes against, you know, on Weight Watchers, everything we've learned is, you know, their concept, the Weight Watchers concept,
you can have anything.
You can have anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So I specifically looked up sugar addiction because that's something that I struggle with. So it really doesn't matter. I think, like what you said, like, learn how it affects you. So I'm going to share a little bit of what I found about sugar addiction that I thought was really interesting. So that the average American consumes 22 teaspoons of added sugar per day. So that's not like your fruits, or, you know, where there's sugar that's naturally occurring, like added sugar in things.
Wow.
And women are only supposed to have 6 teaspoons, and men are only supposed to have 9. So we're having like almost 4 times the amount of sugar that we're supposed to.
And it's in stuff that you don't even know.
It's in stuff like ketchup that you would think like, oh, that's just tomatoes and maybe some vinegar. But it talked about how it affects your body and your brain. And so it talked about how when your blood sugar rises rapidly, that creates inflammation over time, which can lead to high blood pressure and brain shrinkage, which I think is interesting because I think of myself as a fairly intelligent person, but I imagine if your brain shrinks, that affects like your cognitive abilities.
Yeah, and you don't want to do something that you know is going to shrink your brain.
Right. And then they said, this was from a scientist. I'm reading this from prevention.com, by the way. It was just a really interesting study, and I'll link it in our blog. But it says there's a compelling argument being made that Alzheimer's is actually type 3 diabetes, or insulin resistance of the brain. And that's kind of talking about that shrinkage and having dementia and cognitive problems. That inflammation is clearly a factor. So then it goes on to say, like, why is it so hard to get to kick? It's because it's in everything. You have it in dressing. So even when you're trying to be healthy and you have a salad, you're having a dressing that's loaded with sugar, in ketchup or in breads, that sugar's added in everything. And that's one of the reasons that it's so hard to kick.
Right.
Is that it's hard to like truly get away from it. The rest of the article, just because I'm talking about the article real quick, goes on to talk about how you kick it. I suggest reading just the first half of the article, because the second half of the article was clearly written by someone who does not have an addiction to sugar. So
they're like, just try really hard, right?
Yeah. But I thought that reading that research was eye-opening and made me think like, okay, I want to address this.
Yeah.
But now how do I do it?
Yeah. Well, so we've talked about like acknowledging it in the first place, which that always seems like basic, but I think it's true, you know, because I don't walk around thinking of myself as having an addiction. But anytime you were to ask me, do you think you have a food addiction? I'd say yes.
Right.
So it's like I almost need to recognize it more often, that that's what I'm dealing with is an actual addiction. And then we talked about going cold turkey, and maybe we're not ready to do that. To say, like, for the rest of my life, I'm never going to have sugar or whatever.
That's hard to mentally deal with.
Yeah. Well, and then if you just overeat on other stuff, I mean, no, it's true. I don't really overeat on broccoli, but like ever, unless you put Velveeta on it or something. But I do think that, you know, you are going to have carbs again, even good carbs, you know, and for me, it's not as easy for me to understand what it is that I want to overeat. Sometimes I just crave stuff. So I don't even know exactly what I would cut out.
Yeah.
So then, you know, I guess the next thing is, so what's the next? What's the other option? You know, Weight Watchers, like we talked about, sort of says to just have a little bit and fit it within your diet. How's that been working for your sugar addiction?
Well, I think that's hard when you use whatever it is you're addicted to for a purpose. So I don't drink coffee, and I am tired a lot, and so I've used sugar as a crutch. Like when I'm tired and I get groggy in the morning or in the, you know, that mid-afternoon slump, I go and I grab a handful of chocolate chips, and that like perks me up for a little bit. Now I know it's a total artificial, you know,
right. And you're gonna crash in a minute,
and I know I'm gonna crash in like a minute, but that's just another reason to have another handful. And I've noticed that the days that I'm groggy and I don't get a lot of sleep, or I'm just groggy and I did get a lot of sleep,
right,
that I reach for the sugar more frequently. And so it's hard to say like, oh, you just can't have sugar, you can have less sugar, when you're actually using it for a reason.
Right.
So for me, when I think about sugar, not just my addiction, but also the reason, the first thing I have to do is, for the times that I'm using it for this purpose, I need to find something to replace it with.
Right.
I can't just say I can't have it, because I'm still going to be tired and groggy or whatever, and I still need to function. So I've been trying to get more sleep. Which is always a good thing, because we know that sleep also affects your weight management.
It absolutely does. Yeah. I believe in that.
And I've been trying to have more natural sugars. So if I am groggy, I reach for a mandarin orange, or an apple, which doesn't feel very sweet, but an orange does. It's very sweet, or a strawberry that's super sweet.
Do you feel like that really helps you replace? Do you think that...
I don't think it gives me the same perk, but it does wake me up a little bit and makes me feel like, okay, kind of helps me get through that slump.
Yeah.
But I reach for the really sweet things. Like apples aren't very sweet, but like raspberries are very sweet, or strawberries or mandarin oranges, those are a lot more sweet. And I think that I know that they're sugar, but they're not added sugar. They're natural sugars, and they're better than the alternative.
Right.
So I feel like that's the first step, is like trying for the things that the sugar that has a cause or a purpose, I have to replace it with something. And then the second is just dealing with like the stress eating of it all.
Right.
I've talked a time before about how after having a stressful experience, I went and I just got a handful of chocolate chips. If you can't tell, I have a lot of chocolate chips in my house.
Well, I was going to ask you, I wondered if is it sugar specifically, or do you think it's a chocolate addiction?
Chocolate's my favorite, but if I don't have chocolate, I'll find something else.
Okay.
There have been times that I've had no chocolate in the house for the purpose of I'm not going to eat chocolate.
And then the sugar you find.
And then I just find something else like powdered sugar and, you know, peanut butter or something.
Well, there is something that you're getting out of it, right? It's the dopamine. You are getting, there's a physical response to some of these foods. And I was thinking about the other day I was traveling, and it was sort of just a stressful time. And I went and I had what I really wanted, which was like Panda Express. But instead of ordering the brown rice, I ordered the fried rice. And it was so good. And I sat there and I literally just felt better. And now I'm thinking back, and I thought I totally just drugged myself, basically, to get that feeling.
Yeah.
And I knew going in that I would feel, I knew that it was going to get that feeling. So, I don't know about you, but for me, I feel like I'm almost craving the aftermath. I want that sort of really, that really good feeling, that dopamine or whatever, I want that feeling. And then, it's uncomfortable, and I ate too much, or, I feel bad about myself. Like, that stuff comes too, but for some reason, when you're craving, that feeling, it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, when you think about the concept of addiction, that's considered the high,
right,
that you get from it. I mean, I know that we're talking about food, but if it's true addiction, that's considered your high, and then you have the, the down when you're coming down off of it, and that's when you feel the guilt and the shame. And
Yeah. Well, I thought about two things, so just tell me what you think. One is, what was that show a long time ago about, it was that movie about that really famous, like, scientist guy who had schizophrenia, and, do you remember, like, it started, darn it, what's the name of that? And anyway, he had, he couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't real. Russell Crowe.
It sounds vaguely familiar, like he wrote on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anyway, so this, I feel stupid that I don't remember, but anyway, so in the movie, he had, like, there were the characters that he didn't know if they were real or not real. When he recognized that they were not real, he still saw them all the way until they showed him in older age, and those people were sort of still following him around. That he, you know, in his earlier years, he thought that they were real. And he talked about, like, I just have to recognize that they're there, but they're not real. And I thought, that's sort of like living with an addiction. Like, it's always there, you know, and you're trying to minimize it, and you're trying to push it off to the side and try to, like, you know, just, you know, eat better foods and not sort of give in to it. You know, it's probably always tempting for him to want to engage with those characters because they were, like, major parts of his life. And I thought for an addiction, even, you know, people that are alcoholic or that have drug addictions, like, they don't just say, like, oh, I stopped it, now I'm no longer an alcoholic. Like, they always consider themselves to be alcoholics, but it's a thing that's part of their life, but they deal with it, but it's there. And that might be, like, a really bad comparison based on the movie, because it's totally, he had a psychological disorder. It's a whole thing. But anyway, I guess I thought, like, to just sort of keep, you know, always try to remember that it exists, and that what we're trying to do is manage it and reduce it. It might not ever technically be cured, quote unquote. Maybe it can. I mean, maybe the concept of giving it up forever would do that. But to me, that would only just give it up. That would only cure it until you had another one. So I don't know if that cures it, but I don't know. So that's just one thought of just, like, you're trying to manage it, but I don't know that it goes away per se.
Right.
And then the other thing is, there was this study that came out a few weeks ago that talked about how there was people that were losing weight, and in the study they weren't even trying to prove this, but so what they discovered sort of by surprise, they were sending messages to the people, some of the people that were, like, one of the groups that was trying to lose weight in the study, and they were just saying, you know, good job, this is really tough, you know, good job. And they realized that the people that they had said that to did better than the other ones. And what was the difference, what the messaging that was different was they were acknowledging the difficulty.
Yeah, so one, they were saying, just keep going. I remember this study. I think I read it. Yeah. They were just saying, just keep going. You've got this. And the other one was saying, this is really hard, but you can do it.
Right.
And the one where they messaged the hard message.
Yeah, and that has a lot of implications for weight loss in general, but it feels like for something like this, that's sort of like a long-term issue, and it's more complex, you know, than just, you know, finding a diet or something, or focusing on nutrition. I mean, it's a real complex thing. It feels like not just, you know, by acknowledging it and just acknowledging that it's difficult, maybe then you can sort of rise to the strength of overcoming it. Or
I think we see that, like, when I follow bloggers, or I look at, you know, Facebook people that I'm following that are on Weight Watchers, I tend to follow the ones who recognize the struggles. Yeah. Because it feels more inspiring to me to know that maybe I too can overcome the struggles. Right. That the struggles aren't hidden, and so maybe acknowledging it makes it easier to overcome because you're not feeling so alone in it.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes when you go online and stuff and you look at weight loss, you think, well, why is it so easy for that person in that before and after picture? Right. Because we never, you know, there's so much more going on. And for some other podcast, we should talk about, like, all the studies that have come out about, like, how much your body pushes back against losing weight and why that makes it more difficult. Yeah, I've been really
interested as I've read more of those articles about how your body pushes back. We should definitely cover that.
A Beautiful Mind.
A Beautiful Mind. That's what it is.
A Beautiful Mind. Okay, I had to look at it.
So if you have dark characters in your past,
it's totally different, but it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's similar. Maybe it helps. Maybe it doesn't. So I guess, is there any other like, do you feel like you kind of have I don't know that we learned anything today, but like, do you feel?
I feel like for me, what was good was researching what it's doing.
Yeah.
It's not just that it's making me fat.
Yeah.
Like, it could really be shrinking my brain and affecting my cognitive ability, setting me up for Alzheimer's, in a way that other diseases don't.
Well, good. Well, we'll have to like do a check-in. I mean, I don't know, because this isn't something that you just solve, I guess. I mean, some of the ideas were things like go see a psychologist, or, so there are 12-step programs, there are things like that if you feel like it's something that you can't solve.
And I've been to Overeaters Anonymous before I determined this was a sugar thing. I've gone to Overeaters Anonymous before because I thought maybe that would help. It's the 12-step program, and I didn't really find that helpful.
Yeah.
But because I mine is more triggered than, like, it's more, not triggered, but more narrow than I think they talk about. But I really would be interested if we have any listeners that if you've dealt with this in your journey, if you found a solution, to share it with us. I feel like I'm still very much figuring out what's working and what doesn't, and I feel like I deal with backslides all the time where like I say I'm not going to have sugar, and I try to go cold turkey, and then that doesn't work, and I say, I'm just going to moderate my sugar, and that doesn't quite work. So I feel like I'm constantly trying new things. We clearly don't have a solution. Yeah,
this podcast is more just about mentioning that we have a problem here.
We have a problem, and if you do too, but you found, even if you haven't found a solution, I'd love to hear, but like if you found some kind of solution that works for you, or some kind of unique way of thinking, that would be, please share it with me, because I feel like I'm constantly battling this.
The only thing for me that I feel like has helped over the past year has been, because we were, we're trying to like fit in within a particular amount of points, finding foods that I felt like I could eat a lot of. So I still got that feeling that I can have whatever I want, not whatever, but I can have a lot. And then just eating those instead. So substitutes. And I don't know how that works for sugar, but I know that for my whole carb crave, my 94% fat-free popcorn, and I'll eat the whole bag. And then we discovered, Murray's sugar-free cookies are really low points, but they give you that sweet taste. And so finding things like that, and it's not perfect, but I have had times when I've not reached for worse. I haven't overeaten. I haven't gone worse because I was able to have something that helped.
I have not found any replacement for chocolate.
Well, how could you? It's so good. Yeah.
I remember when Freestyle was introduced and people were like, oh, I'm mixing the fat-free yogurt, the Greek yogurt, with, a sugar-free pudding, and they put this picture on Facebook, and I was like, oh, that looks amazing. It looks like this creamy, delicious dessert, and it was disgusting. Basically, anything mixed with that Greek yogurt, any sugar-free item mixed with a Greek yogurt, I think I found it gross. I can't, doesn't fit my need. So I haven't been able to find any. So I've struggled with that.
So even like, obviously like sugar-free pudding, chocolate pudding doesn't work for you.
Sugar-free candy. I mean, it's sugary, but it doesn't, like, when you get the craving for the thing that you're craving, it doesn't fit the craving. It doesn't make me no longer want it. It makes me like, well, now I really need to go to the store to get the good stuff. So
right.
So, yeah, I don't know. I imagine we'll probably revisit this at another time.
Yeah.
As we, work with it more. So.
Well, one thing we try to do is set shorter term goals. So, like, you don't have to solve it forever, but maybe just for the next week or.
Well, I found a replacement for the when it has a purpose, which is the low energy.
Okay. And
I go for fruit instead. Maybe I should look into other things that raise your dopamine levels.
Well, they say exercise
walking.
Does that. We can exercise. Whoa. Okay.
It keeps coming back to that.
Go back to our podcast on exercise where you and I were the ones that were like, oh, man, especially me. Oh, dang it. Exercising, it just solves so many problems. If I would only do it.
But when you have low energy, do you want to go for a walk? No.
When you're craving chocolate, do you want to go for a walk?
Yeah, so
there's got to be other stuff besides exercise and chocolate to give you dopamine.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. We'll check in with you next week.